"Do sit down," the girl said. "We only popped in for a moment and we didn't want to interrupt." She bent to help Simon pick up his chair. Her black curls bobbed forward over her forehead. She was a very pretty girl, Jane thought, watching her. Much older than any of them, of course. She wore a bright green shirt and black trousers, and her eyes seemed to twinkle with a kind of hidden private laughter. Jane suddenly felt extremely young. Mr. Withers, showing a lot of very white teeth, was talking to Mother. "Mrs. Drew, do please forgive the intrusion. We had no intention of breaking up your supper." "Not at all," said Mother, looking faintly bemused. "Won't you have a cup of tea?" "Thank you, no, most kind, but we have a meal waiting for us on the boat. We simply came to issue an invitation. My sister and I are in Trewisick for some days, with the yacht to ourselves, on our way round the coast, you know, and we wondered whether you and the children would care to spend a day out at sea. We have..." Gosh, Simon really nearly upset his chair again. "How marvellous! You mean go out in that fabulous boat?" "I do indeed," said the smiling Mr. Withers. Simon spluttered without words, his face glowing with delight. Mother said hesitantly, Well, of course I realise we'd be descending on you out of the blue," Mr. Withers said soothingly, "but it would be pleasant to have some company for a change. And when we met your husband in the harbour master's office this morning, and discovered we are neighbours in London..." "Are you?" said Barney curiously from the table. "Where?" "Marylebone High Street, just round the corner from you," said the girl, dimpling at him. "Norman sells antiques." She looked across at Mother. "I expect you and I use the same shops, Mrs. Drew. You know that little patisserie where you can get those gorgeous rhumbarbas?" "Oh, I try not to," Mother said, beginning to smile. "Well, really, this is very kind, considering we're strangers, but I'm not sure whether... Well, the three of them can be rather a handful, you know." "Mother!" Simon looked aghast. Mr. Withers puckered up his nose boyishly at her. "But my invitation extends to the whole family, Mrs. Drew. We sincerely hope you and your husband will join our little crew as well. Just a trip out and back, you understand, round the bay, as the commercial gentlemen have it, with perhaps a little fishing. I shall enjoy showing off the boat. Tomorrow, perhaps. They say it should be a fine day." What an old-fashioned way of talking he has, Jane thought idly. Perhaps it comes of selling antiques. She looked at Simon and Barney, both all eagerness at the idea of a day on a strange yacht, gazing anxiously at their parents, and then back at Mr. Withers' immaculate grey white flannels and folded scarf. "I don't like him," she thought. "I wonder why." "Well, thank you very much indeed," Mother said finally. "I don't think I shall come, but if you'll forgive me, if the sun comes out I shall go and work up above the harbour. But I know Dick and the children would love to go." "Ah, yes, Dr. Drew was telling us about your painting," Mr. Withers said warmly. "Well, the loss will be ours. But if the muse calls, dear lady, the rest of the family will come, though, I hope." "Not off," said Simon swiftly. "It sounds smashing," Barney said. He added as an afterthought, "Thank you very much." "Well," said Father cheerfully, "this is a noble gesture, I must say. We're all very grateful to you. As a matter of fact," he looked vaguely around the room, "there should have been some other members of the family here, but he seems to have disappeared. My wife's uncle. He rented the house for us." The children automatically followed his gaze round the room. They had forgotten great Uncle Merry. Now they realised there had been no sign of him since the two sudden visitors appeared. The door that led into the breakfast room at the back of the house stood slightly open, but when Barney ran across to look in, there was no one there. "Professor Lyon, you mean?" the girl said. "That's right." Father stared at her for a moment. "I didn't think I'd mentioned him this morning. Do you know him, then?" Mr. Withers answered for her quickly and smoothly. "I believe we have met once or twice. In another sphere than this. In the course of our work, you know. Charming old gentleman, as I remember. A little unpredictable." "Well, that he certainly is," Mother said ruefully. "Always dashing off somewhere. He hasn't even finished his supper this time. But do let me give you some tea or coffee." "Thank you, but I think we should be getting back," the girl said. "Vane will have supper waiting." Mr. Withers pulled down the ridges of his immaculate blazer with a precise, feminine gesture. "You're quite right, Polly, we mustn't be late." He swung his white smile round the room like a lighthouse. "Vane is our skipper, the professional on board, and an excellent chef too. You must sample his cooking tomorrow. Well now, shall we see you all down in the harbour at... the weather is fine?" 9:30 perhaps? We'll have the dinghy waiting at the quay. Splendid. Father moved with him out into the hall, and everyone straggled after them. On the way, Polly Withers paused and looked up over Simon's head at the old Cornish maps hanging among the oil paintings on the dark wall. Do look, Norman. Aren't they marvellous? She turned to Mother. This really is a wonderful house. Did your uncle rent it from a friend? Captain Tom's. We've never met him. He's abroad. Quite an old man. A retired sailor of some kind. I believe his family have owned the Grey House for years. A fascinating place. Mr. Withers was looking about him with a professional eye. He has some beautiful old books, I see. He reached one hand idly down to the door of a long, low bookcase in the hall, but it would not open. I keep everything locked, Father said. You know what it is with a furnished house. One always nervous of damaging things. An admirable principle, Mr. Withers said formally. But his sister was smiling down at Simon. I bet it's a wonderful place to explore, though, isn't it? She said. Have you children been looking for secret tunnels and things yet? I know I should have done in an old house. Do let us know if you find one. Simon said politely, feeling Barney's anxious eyes on his back. Oh, I don't think there's anything like that here. Well, till tomorrow then, Mr. Withers said from the doorstep, and they were gone. Isn't that terrific? Barney said eagerly when the door closed. A whole day out on that yacht. Do you think they'll help us sail? Mind you keep out of their way until you're asked, said Father. We don't want any casualties. Well, you could be ship's doctor. I'm on holiday, remember? Why didn't you tell us you'd met them? Demanded Simon. I was going to, Father said meekly. I expect I was too busy being irritable. He grinned. You can let Rufus now if you want to, Barney. But he's not going on that boat tomorrow, so don't ask. Jane said suddenly, I don't think I will either. Well, for goodness sake, Simon stared at her. Why ever not? I should get seasick. Of course you wouldn't. Not under sail. There won't be any smelly old engine running. Oh, come on, Jane. No, said Jane, more firmly. I'm not batty about boats like you are. I really don't want to go. They won't mind, will they, Father? Simon said in disgust. You must be nuts. Leave her alone, said his father. She knows her own mind. No, they'll understand, Jane. No one wants you to be worried about getting ill. So how do you feel about going in the morning, though? I do think I would be safer not, Jane said. But she said nothing about her real reason for not wanting to go. It would have sounded too silly to explain that she felt a strange uneasiness about the tall white yacht, and about the smiling Mr. Withers and his pretty sister. The more she thought about it, the sillier it seemed, so that in the end she convinced herself, as well as everybody else, that her reason for avoiding the trip was nothing but fear of seasickness. But again, nobody knew where Great Uncle Merry had gone. All right, so got Mr. Withers and his sister looking around that house a little bit too curiously for my liking. All right, so we'll be moving on to Chapter 4 tomorrow. Thanks very much for tuning in. I'll see you again tomorrow. Hopefully with some better light.